Is everybody in? Is everybody in? The show is about to begin.
Welcome to the podcast, concerts that made us, interviews and stories, tales from the bus. We love taking you back to when it all went down, the greatest live shows and the cheering crowd sound. It's concerts that made us, concertsthatmadeus.com.
This is Glenn
And this is Jason.
from the band Palooka, and you are listening to the Concerts That Made Us.
I got a reason, I got
Glenn and Jason, you're very welcome to Concerts That Made Us.
Thank
Hello.
you. We're really happy to be here.
It's great to have you guys now. How are you doing today?
I think we're doing pretty good.
Yeah, it's actually a nice day in Seattle for a change. So that's good. Beautiful.
Right. I've never been now, but I've always imagined it's very similar to Irish weather, nothing but rain and wind and stuff like that.
We do sort of have one season between like November and April that is 90% of the time lower clouds, at least some drizzle, and punctuated by some big storms that roll in off the ocean and occasional snow. But I think people get surprised when they're here for the summer. We have really nice summers, and like today, we get these really nice, cool, clear days, which are pretty awesome.
Right. I'm sold. I'm moving to Seattle, so.
Well, and maybe we could trade places because I've always wanted to go to Ireland and haven't quite made it yet. Hopefully by the end of next year.
Oh, that'd be pretty cool. Pretty cool. And we opened the show with Save Yourself, which Palooka released on 13th of October. It's the title track off your upcoming EP. We'll be premiering 2 more tracks later. But what can you tell us about Save Yourself?
This EP was in large part written during the pandemic. We were in the process of recording a full-length album when COVID hit. We had 6 songs in some sort of state of completion. And we ended up, through COVID, going in and finishing it in masks, one of us at a time. And 5 of the songs we released on our previous EP. Save Yourself comes from that time during COVID where we decided, well, we didn't want to stop in our tracks. No pun intended. So we started sending tracks back and forth. I may start writing a guitar part of a song and put it to a click and then send it to Jason, and Jason would add drums to it. And then we'd trade that to other people. And I have a home studio. And so I'd assemble it in Pro Tools. And so this EP and Save Yourself in particular came out of that period. And I was literally living on an island during COVID on a 3 acres by myself, and the isolation, and as well as what was going on in the world, this concept of we're on our own a little bit, and we're navigating this unique environment. That's where the song started from. And then by the time I gave it to the rest of the guys in the band, they added so many great things and made it so much better than what I brought in the room initially, or the original idea. And that's really, again, the birthplace of Save Yourself, the song, but also Save Yourself, the EP.
It was also an interesting way to work those demos out, doing our work at home, because I could sit out in my shop / garage building with my drum setup, and I could just play it, listen to it, play it, listen to it. And, in a 2-hour time, I could play the song 25 times and pick the one I like without, in a studio when you're dealing with a bunch of other people and you're dealing with the band and you're dealing with the producer and all that stuff. But when you're by yourself, you can go, okay, I don't like that. Okay, I like that. Okay, I don't like that. And then it was an interesting process for getting those songs fleshed out before we went into the real studio. So I kind of enjoyed that, actually.
And we're planning on taking that process sort of moving forward and incorporating that in how we do even post-COVID.
I was just going to say, you must be longing for times like that again, because we're so used to hearing how hard it was for musicians during COVID. There was no gigs, all that we've heard. But you never actually think of how easy it must have been to create music, the amount of time you would have had on your hands.
Oh, yeah. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for like a year and a half of doing nothing.
And there's definitely, one can't we can't sell short how difficult that time period was and how tragic it was for so many people. At the same time, I think, we all were forced to live a different way. And I think there were some silver linings where each of us had to find ways to adapt, and we've carried those things forward. I mean, I think it's happening in business as well as people's personal lives. So, and maybe about the cover of the EP, I think sort of speaks to this. It's sort of light at the on the horizon a little bit, and it was sort of, how do we get through this, and how do we find those places of light and places to move forward to? And yeah, that process was very beneficial, and this EP is very much influenced by what we were going through in that time, and the mindset, the emotional set, and the way that we worked.
Yeah. And when can we expect the EP? Is there a launch date set in stone for it yet?
No launch date set in stone, but first quarter of 24 is what we believe, maybe the second, third week of February. That's not locked down, but in that time frame.
Right, right. What kind of things go into planning the launch of an EP these days?
I think with us, we're doing this a little bit differently than we have in the past. We're sort of making this compromise between people just releasing singles, and I think as a band, we really appreciate the longer format of an EP and or an album. We're a little bit older, and I think that's where we came from, and that's informed how we think about music. And so what we're doing now is releasing 3 singles, the ones we'll play today, and prior to the release of the actual EP. And so being able to have the time, the run time before EP release to actually get these 3 singles out. Each will have a video also. We will have a Save Yourself video releasing here relatively soon. The launch date is not exactly set in stone. We're waiting on a few things, but it's all that pre-planning, and that's something a little bit newer for us, or at least for myself. We've usually just dropped a release and then started putting singles out from that release, and we're doing a little bit differently, and it's exciting, rolling up and working up towards the release with all these pre-releases of the singles.
The way that the business is now, where so much stuff is based on streaming and everything is mostly online, that you have to make a decision whether you want hard, handheld music or just streaming music. And because of the streaming music, it's almost easier just to release a song every 3 or 4 months than it is to put a whole record together. But like Glenn said, because we're of an age where we love having albums and CDs and stuff, that's kind of still the way we see that music should be put out. But it's just an even mixture of the old ways and trying to maintain a band and a music career, in quotes, there in the modern age. So I think Glenn pretty much nailed it there.
Do you think it's actually worth it though for bands to release physical copies of their music these days when streaming is free?
Well, I think that the one thing about that kind of stuff is that when you're actually playing a show, it's cool to have something to offer somebody. Say, hey, we got a table back there. We have 2 or 3 CDs. We have vinyl records. Because sometimes it is cool just to have something to look at and to hold in your hand, which is the idea of everything just being floating around in a cloud is it's the modern way, but it's also, to me, it's lacking in something where a record is to not get too sentimental, but a record is a piece of art. You have your cover, you take the time and the effort and the energy to come up with everything from the picture to the font to the way the credits are. I mean, everything is thought out. So when you can give somebody something and you're offering your work to them, and that's different than just hearing it, if that makes sense. I mean, I guess it's kind of the way I see it.
Well, and also I think your question is good, in that you said worth. Is it worth it to a band? And that to me is a little bit of a interesting term, because what is it worth to a band to release something? I won't mention any names, but I've listened to several legacy acts talk about how it just doesn't make sense for them to get together and record because of the way that the industry is, and they can't monetize it the way that they had used to be able to. And I think about these phenomenal players that have this rich history, and they're making a decision not to get into a room together to create because it's quote unquote not worth it to them because of the dynamics of the industry. Where it's worth it to us is because this is in our DNA. We can't stop doing this, and that's why we are still together. And all of us started playing in our teens, and we're in bands since our teens. And now we're at an age where we don't have to do this, but it's worth it to be in the room with the other guys in Palooka and create these things and get in the studio and flesh these things out. And then, there's something remarkable to me about sitting down with a guitar and an emotion and then introducing that to a band and the band making it so much better, and then getting in a recording studio and turning it into this grand thing that was hard to imagine when you're sitting on a couch with a guitar so many months before, and then playing it in front of a bunch of people who are getting into it. That's the worth for me. And so that's one of those terms that is self-defined by everybody. So I think for a lot of bands, it's not worth it to them to release a physical product. For Palooka, it is.
I gotcha. And, you mentioned the music videos. I have to ask, what can we expect from the music video for Save Yourself when it dropped? Did you go down the whole route of its images of you guys playing live, or did you create a story for the video?
Well, we have a friend named Ryan, and he works at Hemp Films. It's his baby, and we've had luck working with him in the past. And we want to sort of have this sort of theme and feel that we think works with the music. And so we actually are doing some live stuff. It's not in the live show context, but it is us actually playing to the music, and with some really nice sort of moody imagery that I think really fits with the song. So we're really proud of this video. It's similar. We did a Head in the Clouds video off our last EP, All Those Things Left Behind. And it's more similar to that, where it's us individually playing them with interspersed other scenes. And again, we're really excited about it. And I think it captures the mood of the music very well. It's not just sort of arbitrary imagery thrown at a piece of music. I think the two work really well hand in hand.
Right. I'm looking forward to seeing it now. I can't wait for it to come out. And I can't move on without mentioning London Bridge Studio. You recorded the EP there. You also recorded your last album there. For those of us that have never set foot in the place, what is it like? Tell us all about it.
Take it, Jason.
Well, it's cool. It's obviously a legendary place where a lot of pretty huge records were made. And it's when you're in there, you get the vibe. It has that feeling, and the interesting thing is that even if those records weren't made there, it's a great facility. The building, the where you set the drums up, the sound you get, everything about it is just conducive to making great music. And then when you add on the fact that there's this spirit of these other great bands and records that were made there, that really kind of pushes it over the top when you're waiting for Chuck to put down a vocal take, or Chris or Glenn are working on their guitars, or when Howard was doing a bass take and you're sitting in the lounge and there's like gold and platinum records all over the place. It kind of puts an interesting perspective on it, because you're in a building where history was made, and you're just trying to be a part of it and make your own little piece of history if you can. And the expectations of greatness are all over the place in that building, and we really enjoy working there. We've gone back, and we have a great producer that we work with, Jonathan Plum, who gets us and works well with us and gets the best performances out of us, and then also lets us kind of be the judge of our own takes and things like that. So it's really conducive for making excellent music. I can say that for sure.
Right, right. Will you guys be making it your home base, so to speak, for recording? Will you constantly go back there for every record?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure we've made like a declarative sort of decision about that. However, sort of to add on to what Jason was saying, is it's this place with all this lore, as well as just phenomenal recording equipment. Excuse me, a really nice giant live room, and all like the gold records of the history. But Jonathan Plum and the people at London Bridge make it also very approachable. It's not stuffy. And so it's an incredibly comfortable environment to record in. And if I were a betting man, I'd bet we'd be back there for our next release.
Right. Good to hear. Good to hear. And I have to mention this EP is somewhat of a comeback for Palooka. You were getting known a few years ago and then tragedy struck. Tell us about that time for the band and how it affected it.
Well, a lot of these things are not necessarily connected. Things just sort of happened in a certain time frame, but weren't necessarily directly connected to the band. Obviously we had COVID, and that affected everybody the way that it did. We have our previous singer, Paul Passarelli, unfortunately has passed recently, and that is a very difficult personal thing, I think, for all of us, but it was not necessarily directly impactful. It didn't change our dynamic because we weren't working together at the time that he passed, but still great friends, and a huge amount of respect for the person. And I think the way those things at least impact me personally, and can't not impact my writing, is just realizing how precious this thing we get, life is, and how fleeting it is. And I think it's very easy to take a lot of things for granted in this world. And I think when you lose somebody like that, it has to sort of focus your attention to the fact that, again, this is a great gift that we have. And not only life itself, but again, coming back to where it does impact the band, it's like I get to do this with, four of my best buddies, and people that I musically respect as well as personally respect. And I think those things become more in focus, at least for myself.
I get you. Jason, anything you'd like to add?
Well, just that losing Paul as a person was pretty tragic and sad in itself, and he had a really long, pretty storied career here in Seattle. He was a known guy. He was in bands back. I mean, he's our age, so he was in bands when we were in bands back in the '80s and stuff. So he was a pretty known presence in the Seattle scene. So just the absence of him in general was kind of a huge gap. But it's sad, but it happens. I don't know. It's just tragic. I'm sorry he's gone.
And before we move on, we're going to premiere F Mind. Before we take a listen to it, do you want to tell us a bit about this track?
This was basically brought in by our singer Chuck, and he's an excellent songwriter. He brings things in, and they immediately gel with the band. He's a great lyricist. He's obviously a great singer, and he'll have everything from the basic guitar, bass, drums parts, the melodies, the vocals, everything, and then we basically just have to kind of learn it and then put our own spin on it. Glenn, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree with all that. And I think in addition, I think this is a reflection on observationally, some of the ways that our world is changing. And some of the voices that get amplified in our society that make you question if people have lost their mind. And yeah, I think Chuck does a really good job with flushing that concept out. And the song also, again, I think very much so with this whole EP, I really feel the mood of these songs being captured well. You know, when you're doing these things, you hope you do these songs justice. And I believe that F Mind is one of those examples where the mood, I think, is really caught well by the band and the recording process. And, you know, with working with Jonathan, the whole thing came out, I think, as well as it could have been. And it's on point with that mood.
Now, You guys have mentioned that you're all veterans of the Seattle scene. You've been around since the pre-grunge days. Personally, I thought there was just silence in Seattle before grunge. What was the music scene really like back then?
Well, it's funny. I think Jimi Hendrix made a little bit of impact on Not Silence and the Sonics. There's so many heart. I think one of the things that to me about grunge was a time when people outside of Seattle shone a spotlight on Seattle in a moment. But the rich history of music in this area has always been impressive to me, still is impressive to me. And I understand that the world's perspective is that it just came out of nowhere and it just popped up in the middle of nowhere. And to me, it was more of a continuation of a spectrum of rich music history in the Seattle and Puget Sound area. And I think one of the things that made, I think, grunge unique, at least my perspective when I was playing before that, is you really had a lot of people that were dogmatic in either like a very metal sort of oriented scene and a very punk oriented scene. And that represented a chunk of the people. But what I think happened during the pre-grunge phase is there's a lot of people in the middle that appreciated both. And I think what you hear is Seattle's interpretation of people influenced by the metal and the punk that came before them and during that time, and incorporating it in ways that worked well together. And I think if Seattle did something during the grunge phase that was unique, was, again, talking about Irish weather and Seattle weather, you're stuck in your basement for 6 months with your buddies and you love metal and punk and you're writing tunes. And I think that's really what the world saw, was how that sort of coalesced and became what the world knows as grunge. But I do believe that there was a rich history of music before and after that. I mean, I even to this day, we're going to practice this evening. And one of the things I noticed when I walked through the practice facility is there's all these bands, and there were really, a lot of them are really good. And so, yeah, that was a moment where the world saw it, but it's a continuation of, I think, of a long and rich legacy of Puget Sound music.
And let me add some to that, because the thing that it was interesting that you said that there's basically before grunge what was here, and it was a very vibrant music city. That it, like Glenn was just saying, that the when I moved here in October of 1984, and the hard rock metal scene was just thriving. There were shows every weekend. There were bands, and exactly what he just said. There was a lot of punk music and a lot of hard rock metal music, and a lot of those people didn't mix, but a lot of them did, and a lot of them would go to both. You could go one weekend, you're going to see, Kiss at the Seattle Center Coliseum, and then the next weekend you're going to see Corrosion of Conformity or whatever. It's just like there was such a great, vibrant scene. And then when the big bands that people finally heard of, the 5 major bands or whatever that made it out of here, at that point became the focal point of it. But there was Glenn was in a band, I was in a band, and we were playing constantly. We were playing shows in, you'd go to Glenn would play at skating rinks, you'd play at VFW halls, you'd play in anywhere where you could put a gig together. And it was such a interesting kind of almost DIY approach, but at the same time, what you would consider large band record label corporate rock was huge. I mean, they were saying that the number of copies of Pyromania that were sold in the Northwest, everybody would have to have bought it twice. I mean, there was so much music being bought and listened to before the grunge thing happened, and I really want to emphasize that it was an amazing time, and there were so many cool bands, and so much good music and so many good times. That was the thing. People were having fun, going to shows, meeting people, and just hanging out, going to these events, and it was so alive. And then the rest of the world kind of caught on when basically what Glenn said, that collision of punk and metal happened, and it created its own child that has gone to, you know, grow up and be whatever it is now. I don't know, but it's there was a really great rock music scene here before grunge that I wish more people knew about.
Well, and to sort of add to the scene comment that Jason said, I just remember, I was sort of in a hard rock band and going to parties in Seattle and being in a basement watching these guys that are in a punk band, several of them together from different punk bands, but that I only knew from being in punk bands that I hadn't really met yet, in this basement, hearing them play Aerosmith. And I think that, again, that mutual appreciation of all things rock, from the punk to the metal side, and where that all met in the middle, is where, at least from my perspective, where that comes from.
For everywhere else in the world, grunge kind of launched Seattle onto the map for people. Do you think there's been any negative impacts of grunge? Or as a band from Seattle, do you think there's any expectations or pressure for you guys to sound a certain way?
I don't know. The biggest negative was kind of funny when I saw, we have a store. It's not around that much anymore, but it was a little bit of a discount store called Kmart. And Kmart had the grunge line of these people dressed in, jeans with flannel shirts tied around their waists. And it was kind of funny seeing it go to that place, go from this local scene that we knew from, again, watching punk bands play Aerosmith in the basement, just dressed how people are dressed here, to then being a look that you could buy a whole ensemble at Kmart with. That, maybe not a negative, but it was at least laughable. But I don't know. I think like with anything, you can find positive and negatives to it. And I think I would just, maybe some people got some more, not the big bands that came out of here. They obviously had attention focused on them, but maybe one of the positive things is that there were really great musicians that wouldn't have had a chance to get the exposure that they did, or opportunities that they did if that hadn't happened. I personally don't see a negative to it. I think it's funny when, like, I don't think Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains necessarily sound like the same band or same type of music per se, or Nirvana. I mean, to me, those are all great bands, but they sound different. But somehow they're all sort of thrown into this one category because geographically where they came from. Again, not a negative, but I think it's an interesting aspect of the grunge thing. But I don't know. I don't perceive any general negative, and if anything, I think there are positives, a lot of positives to it.
Right. And it's called Concerts That Made Us. So I have to ask you guys, as concert goers, what concerts have made you?
Go, Jason.
Okay, you want me to go first? Okay, let's see if I can think back that far. Actually, I asked you if this was a visual meeting, because I actually dug up my T-shirt from my Van Halen 1981 concert. I had seen some concerts I grew up in South Carolina. I grew up down in like Conway, Myrtle Beach area. So I had seen the Rossington Collins Band and Pat Travers and stuff like that at the Myrtle Beach Convention Center. But the first like Coliseum stadium sized band was Van Halen in 1981. And it was one of those things where you go and you're there, and when it's over, okay, I'm gonna make I statements. I was there. I, when it was over, I was thinking to myself, I could live like this every night. I could be here doing this every night. And that's what those guys do. They're here every night. They get to do this every night. And it was such a profound um, realization of what you what's the possibility. The possibility is if you work hard and you're in the right band, you can do this. So that 1981 Van Halen concert was an eye opener. But then, you know, I went from being a huge Van Halen fan to when the first Motley Crue record came out, that kind of blew my mind. And I was living in Myrtle Beach, and they were opening for Ozzy Osbourne. The closest that they came was the Omni in Atlanta. So, of course, we get in the car, we drive all the way 6 hours there, all the way to Atlanta to see Motley Crue open for Ozzy at the Omni in Atlanta, and then drive all the way back and have to go to work the next morning. So,
Oh my God.
that was a great. It was just, I mean, it's everybody that listens to your show has had an experience where you're just this is change this moment is changing my life, and those were the two biggest. I because of where I lived, and Glenn has a different situation. Glenn lived here, where you're 30 minutes from the venue. I had to when I lived in Myrtle Beach, I had to you either had to drive 2 hours to Fayetteville or 4 hours to Charlotte or Greensboro or Columbia, to these other bigger cities. It was a trek. You know, you had to put the effort in to go see bands.
Pilgrimage.
Yes, and so I got to see. I got to see a lot of Iron Maiden, Scorpions, Bon Jovi, Poison and Rat. I mean, all the big bands from the '80s. But you had to put the effort. You had to drive. Def Leppard. I saw Def Leppard open for Billy Squier, and then they were doing so well on that album. They came back the same year as a headlining act. So I got to see him twice in a year, um, and it was before the whole. It was when they were. It was Pyromania. So it was when they were still, pretty rock and not the kind of radio rock they became. It was, I mean, we were super into them because we were like, hey man, these guys are our age. These dudes, I mean, we're going to see this band and these guys are the same age as we are. They're up there doing it. And those concerts at that time, going to those and also that feeling when you walk into when you walk through that doorway into one of those 20,000 seat arenas, it's breathtaking. And I was just back there like 3 weeks ago, and I always have to drive by the old Charlotte Coliseum on Independence Boulevard because that's where I saw that concert. And whenever I'm there, I drive by and just look at that building, and it's still there. It's old. It's been refurbished a little bit, but I'm like that building, that Charlotte Coliseum was like a mecca for me. And so oh man, I can just feel it now. I can feel it. Just talking about it, I can feel that feeling when you walk in there and you see all those people, and when those lights go down and that sound of thousands of people just there, just together to see this event. And then, there's tons of smaller shows that I've seen that, I mean, it's hard to list them all off because there's just hundreds of them, but just, speaking of grunge bands, one of the bands I was in here in Seattle, we ended up one time, Alice in Chains played with us, and Glenn's played with Alice in Chains, but the old Alice in Chains, we played together. And then I didn't see them that much when they were actually progressing through the ranks and getting more and more popular because I'd gone down to Los Angeles for a while. But I remember being at the at the Scream in Los Angeles, and they were in town, and I went and saw them. And when they were doing some of the songs off that first album, I was just looking at Lane, going, I can't believe that voice is coming out of that dude. That there's something crazy about this. And something on that level where you're at a club, and even if it's somebody that you're friends with, and you're just mind is being blown at what they've become. So that's a long answer to a short but I mean, I could sit down and talk about live music shows all day. I mean, it's so fun and interesting, and the other interesting thing was that when I did move to Seattle, it was kind of crazy where the concert would be down at the Seattle Center Coliseum, and you could get in the car, 30 minutes before the door opens and drive down there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is what it's like to live in a city, because everything had been so far away for us when we were in a small town. Everything you had to, I mean, we only got to see cover bands, and there was no original music. It was all cover bands, though I will say that going to this place in Myrtle Beach called the Castaways and seeing Circus and Max Warrior and some of these other bands was so important in my growth as a musician, and seeing these bands and these drummers and just, even though most of the songs were covers, just seeing guys that could play that well, and just having something to aspire to, and just it could be anything from a cover band in a small club to a huge band in a stadium size setting. If the right band and the right songs and the feel is there, it's just magical. It's just like a euphoric feeling that you want to live in forever, and that's what I've tried to do. I just try to maintain that feeling of playing live music, but I'll let Glenn talk about his concert. So why don't you take it there, Glenn?
I'll make it quick. When you think of concerts that made us, I mean, I was a huge Kiss fan, and I got to see them for the first time in '77, August 12th of '77, and Cheap Trick opened. And what a remarkable show. And for me, that sort of, I went from being a little kid that, got a guitar and started trying to write songs, and Kiss was one of my first favorite bands, and they were a gateway drug for me into music and writing and stuff. So seeing that was hugely impactful. And then obviously, Cheap Trick, when they're just coming out of the gate, how powerful they were. It was just remarkable, and very significant juxtaposition against kind of the bombasticness of Kiss with the stripped down sort of Cheap Trick thing was pretty incredible. But when I think of concerts that made us, a band that I really got into were the Angels, or Angel City, as they're called in the United States. And I was one of the first people. Things are different now, with seating and stuff. But back in the day, there was a lot of festival seating in this neck of the woods, where basically you got a seat based on where you were in line. So I got into line for Angel City at the Paramount pretty early. And this guy was standing next to me, just happenstance. And we're there for hours just talking. And I really, really resonated with this person. And his name was Rob Weber. And he ends up being in some bands in Seattle, a band called Shadow, that Mike McCready, who went on to be in Pearl Jam, was in. But he also was very impactful on introducing me to people. A guy named Steve Van Loo, who was in a band that I did was sort of my first big real band. I met through him, and some of the friends that I still have to this day I met through basically that interaction of standing next to a person in a line. And it really was life-changing, not only from a musical sense, but people I know, people I've worked with, people I've created with, my musical path. So those would probably be the two that I would say would stand up most at concerts that at least made me.
That's some amazing answers there. And with Jason, the imagery, you were transporting me back to that time, I have to say.
Well, it's yeah, that first time you walk into a coliseum, it's you're just like, oh my God.
Definitely. And Glenn, you mentioned Kiss. I have to ask, they're in the news recently. They've finished their farewell tour and they've announced that they're going to be a virtual band. Now, what do you make of that?
Oh, I wish they'd just retire from making money. It's just, it's not my cup of tea. I became a Kiss fan back in the early 70s. And to me, their first, going through Destroyer, that was just a magical period in a band that I thought was gritty, that wrote more than just sort of music to accompanying a money-making effort. The stuff on the first album, Hotter Than Hell, these some really cool, gritty rock songs about some sort of content with some sort of gravitas at times, like, I don't know. And maybe that's a big word to use for Kiss, but I think they've just they became what they were accused of being, a style over substance. And to me, this is just another evolution of that. So I don't begrudge Kiss for wanting to make the money or the people it resonates with, but for me, it doesn't really do much.
Yeah, I tend to agree. And I'm looking forward to this part now. For any listeners that haven't caught one of your shows, what can they expect?
Well, I think that we try to, without sounding too self-aggrandizing, I guess, I think we try to write music that's honest, that kind of comes from a real world perspective. And I think our live show reflects that. I think you're looking at 5 rock fans that this means a lot to. And I think we put 110% into what we do, musically, as well as when we get on that stage. It's a privilege for me to be on that stage. And it's a privilege that people will take time out of their busy lives to come and see what we do and experience this live event with us. And so I want to make sure that they're getting everything that they want out of the experience. And I think we deliver that. Now, obviously there's taste. Some people may or may not like our music, but it's not from lack of honest intent. And I think people see that, and the people we resonate with that, I think they get that. And that's why we resonate with them. It's a high energy show for sure.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where even at this point in life, and even after playing so many shows, I always tell people when I'm talking about playing live shows, it's like, I don't sit down on that drum stool unless I'm ready to give 150%. And it's like, I don't care if I'm tired. I don't care if I'm this, I'm that. And I'm like a musical cheetah. I don't do much, but when it's time to go, I'm ready to go. And when I sit down, the chase is on. So there you go.
Well, I only give 110%, so he gives 40% more than I do. So
pick up your game, all right? Come on.
I got to get cheetah-like.
Yeah, there you go. People are surprised that I can move that fast.
Oh, man. And when you think of all the gigs that you guys have played, is there one that sticks out as the most perfect experience you've had?
Oh, man.
I'd have to think that.
Go ahead, Jason.
Wow, I don't know. I'd have to think it. Let me think on that. Give me just a split second. Do you have an answer?
I'm having a hard time coming up with one show. We've been able to play with some people that were really impactful to us, that we're fans of. And some of those shows, especially because when we play with them, they also bring a great crowd. We have our fans that come out to see us, but then I think we obviously get a bump off of when you play with a Michael Schenker or somebody like that. And I always think that from the crowd reaction, it's gratifying when people resonate. They didn't come to see us necessarily, not all of them, but then I think they go home thinking about us, and we'll get bumps on our socials and streams and downloads and stuff after those things. So those type of shows, we had a really good show with Buck Cherry at a place called El Corazon in Seattle, where the crowd, I think we completely resonated with them, and the pop from the crowd was just amazing. And that's the thing, is to me, it's not necessarily one show over the other. It's when you hit that give and take with the audience. And again, that Buck Cherry show at El Corazon, we played with them a couple times, but the second one in particular, that's just magic.
Yeah, we have been able to play with some known bands, and those are fun for various reasons. But I guess if I had to think about when I was in the zone and I felt like we were, I don't know, Glenn, when that Numo show with Hell's Bells,
yeah,
because we recorded that, and then when we listened to it back, it was just like, oh my God, man, this is happening. We're on. And the sound, it's a great room, a big room, and the sound was just killer. And I think that as far as sound wise, and that was one of my favorites. I'm trying to remember some of these, because
that's a good one too. That reminds me, Jason, of on our first album, we had a song called Saving Grace, and first album's called What's Wrong with Wanting Everything. And there's this part in Saving Grace where it goes down right before it comes back up for kind of a fairly aggressive end. And seeing a whole room of people just pogoing to that, and the sound that made, I agree with you, Jason. That was an incredible experience.
Yeah, that was a good night. I think whenever that it sounds good, and it's not because whether we're playing good or bad, it's it's hard to explain. I mean, if people that are hearing this that have been in bands will know exactly what I'm talking about. When you're on the stage and there's some monitor issue where you're just up there and you're playing, but you're having a hard time getting into the song because you can't hear it that well. But then people will tell you out front, oh yeah, it sounded great. And you're like, okay, well, good, because it didn't sound great where I was sitting. But then there's nights where you sit down and the monitors are just awesome. And you're so inside the song, you're just living in the song. And the kick drum is just pounding, and the snare and the guitars are mixed perfectly, and you can hear the singing, and you're so inside of something that you are doing. And that's what makes a great night. And we have had some luck at El Corazon, as Glenn mentioned, because they do have a pretty good monitor system there. So, some of our best shows to the listening crowd may not have been the best shows to us. And some of the best shows to us, it's so dependent on the actual sound system. And sometimes you can play in a kind of a rinky-dink place, but if the crowd's into it, and if you're having fun and you just feel like you're on fire, that makes a great night too. I mean, there's multiple different combinations that can make memorable shows, but that one with the Hell's Bells sticks out to me because the sound was just so big, and it felt like you were playing in one of those giant coliseums because the sound was so loud.
That's an interesting one. Now we'll switch that question around. Is there a gig that you would say was the worst experience you've had, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, you got time for a long list? No.
I would say one of our last shows was pretty miserable for me because the drum monitor was 15 feet away from the side of my face. So I was just, it's one of those ones where you click in and you have to actually hum the song to yourself so you can remember where you are, because you can't even hear the music I mean, you can. It's ridiculous for somebody to say you can't hear it. It's undecipherable where in the song you are. It just sounds like a bunch of noise. And if you've been in a band and you know that experience, then you know what I'm talking about. But I have to really kind of bear down and kind of sing the words and hum the melodies to myself just so I know where I am. And that happened a couple shows back where we walked off the stage and I was just like, I don't even know what just happened. But the people out front said it sounded pretty good, so I'll take it. I'll put it in the
And
win
the
column.
recording of it actually sounded pretty good too. So, and I think kind of going back to the last question is when, that's the thing is when you're doing this, you have to obviously overcome the technical difficulties because the people out front don't necessarily care. They're there for a certain experience, and so you're doing your best to give them that experience. However, when there's technical stuff going on, like Jason said, it sort of takes you out of the moment. When those things don't exist, and you can just go up there and play inside the song and just share that experience with everybody out front. Those are, again, the memorable shows. So I'm with Jason. I can't really think of maybe specific shows. I can think of, the one he's talking about, I completely agree. But again, it sounded pretty good out front from the recording. So I'll take it.
And a lot of times to us, the musicians, the band, if somebody hits a sour note, or if something slightly goes wrong, it feels in the moment like a total disaster, but it's not. It's a very small thing. But you practice and you practice and you practice and you're like, I can't believe you did that. And it's just like, you're just sitting there watching for me, for the drummer seat, I'm listening to everybody, and I'm like a school marm taking notes. But at the end of the show, does it really matter? As long as the people out front enjoyed it and everything, it's fine.
That's it. And when you think of the future, then how would you like Palooka to evolve over, say, the next 5 years? What would the band look like?
Ooh.
We talk about this as being the coalition of the willing, and my hope is that we still want to do this in 5 years, and I think every band has to decide how long they keep doing something. And the great thing about our model is we don't have to do it. We are purely doing this because of what the music and what the relationship between each of us are and is. And so it's hard for me to actually think about not doing this. So it's hard for me also to project 5 years in the future. But if you would ask me 5 years ago, would I still be doing this? I don't know if I could have given you an answer. And, as you get older, you start looking at literally the age that's on your driver's license and stuff and going, wow, am I still doing this at this age? But I also don't feel much different than I did when I was 15 and 16 playing music. Obviously from the outside, I'm different, but I think all of us understand that concept of we're not so different than we were in when we were younger. And I don't feel like walking away from this anytime soon. So to, I guess, more directly answer your question, I hope I'm still doing this with these people and still am enriched by it and still wanting to do it because of the richness of the experience and the richness of the music. And I can't envision that not being the case, but you never know what the future holds.
No, I agree. And it's, I hope that the best that you can hope is that you evolve musically and that you grow and that your songwriting can reflect whatever mood or the time that you're in at that moment. And we've had some good songs come out of some pretty sad moments, but we've also had songs come out of just thin air that just don't really attach to any real incident or feeling. They just kind of evolve out of a thought. But in 5 years from now, I don't know. the cheetah's going to have to spend some time on the treadmill because I got to stay in shape if I'm going to be playing music this heavy 5 years from now.
Right,
The gym.
Just keep working out and doing some exercising. I didn't even have to think about that 20 years, 30 years ago, but now I'm like, okay, if I look at somebody like Tommy Aldridge and I'm like, how the hell does that guy still do it? And he's just stayed fit, and he's just, when you do it that much, you can't not. So as long as I can just keep playing and maintain my health, and I don't see why not. I don't see a point where all of a sudden I'll not want to play music or be involved. My problem is I like music too much. I'll be sitting around. I should learn how to play guitar. I should learn how to play piano. I should learn how to, I was just at somebody's house, and the woman that lives there plays the flute, and I'm just looking at that flute going, I should pick that flute up and try to teach myself how to play it. but I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to put my mouth on somebody else's flute. But you know what but that draw to just any instrument, I just want to pick it up and make some kind of sound with it, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. But I love music, and I'll keep doing it as long as I can until I either can't hear or just can't physically do it.
You're a flute playing cheetah with a heart full of napalm, Jason.
There you go, man.
There you go.
I like it. And before we dive into the last couple of questions, then, plans for 2024. I know the EP is coming out, music videos. Is there any gigs or anything you'd like to tell us about?
Right now, we are just starting to book for 2024, and there's nothing we can announce yet. But I see us sort of the spring time frame on playing a little bit more. I think.
What is that one show that we have? We have one show, right?
Well, yeah, we can't announce that. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we can't announce that yet, and there's a few other things in the hopper. But I am really interested in writing again. The creative appreciation I have of this entity is something I'm really excited about working with, and to a lot of people, they're just hearing the culmination of what we have done in the past with this EP getting released, but we've been writing the whole time. And I would not be surprised if we're in the studio recording a full-length album before the end of 2024. That would be my preference. So, and we've also talked about maybe looking at doing a live album. We have a lot of material. We've been around for a little bit, and we have 2 full-length albums and some EPs, and I think it'd be nice to be able to put the spotlight on that whole collection of music, and I think a live release would allow us to do that. So that's something we've kicked around for a couple of years. I wouldn't be surprised if we get closer to making that a reality in 2024.
Yeah, I would really enjoy that, making a live recording.
Be a hell of a fun time anyway. And we'll dive into the last couple of questions. So these are a couple of random, weird music questions, but I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. If you could see any performer from history in concert for one night only, who would it be?
I would cheat on this because I've lost some friends, so I'd love to go back and see them play. But if I were not going to cheat, I would really love to see AC/DC with Bon Scott and Thin Lizzy with Phil. And that actually has been bills that have come through Seattle at different times. To me, that would be remarkable.
Definitely.
Wow. The first thing that pops off the top of my head is that if I could have been at the concert at Madison Square Garden that's in the film The Song Remains the Same, I would have loved to have been there to see that because I'm a huge Zeppelin fan. I wish I could have seen Lynyrd Skynyrd in there when they were, the original band. Wow. Yeah, I'd have to say, I wish I could have seen Zeppelin at that moment, right around 71, 72. That would be, I don't know. I wish I could have seen Queen at a very specific time, when they were young and firing on all four pistons. Uh, that's a tough question because there's so many great bands, It's just the regional bands. When I was growing up in South Carolina, when we had bands like Mother's Finest and Nantucket, bands like that, where to have been able to see them when they were young, because those were bands that they put out records and they were on major labels, but they were regional Southeast bands that I could have seen had I had the inclination to see live music at a younger age. That's the thing that I always kick myself in the ass about, is that all the concerts I could have seen that I just didn't even have the wherewithal to make it happen, you know. But can't really do anything about that. That's in the same ballpark of the question of who could you see if you could go back in time. Well, you know, that's a wishful thinking answer. So I don't know. I would say that night that they filmed the movie, I would have liked to have been there. That would have
Yeah.
been pretty awesome.
Yeah. Some good picks there. Now, here's where the weird part comes in. If you had to spend 24 hours locked in a room with any musician from history, who would you pick?
Oh man, Glenn, you want to take that one first?
Again, I could cheat and say some friends that are no longer here, but oh man, that's a tough one. I would say, I think Phil. I'll go with Phil Lynott. I think he'd have a lot of good stories, and and there's so much depth to his songwriting that as a songwriter, I would love to pick his brain on that sort of stuff. And he's sort of a well-rounded package of obviously a kind of a fun party guy, at least at one point in time in his life, and the content of what he created. And to me, that wouldn't just be hearing wacky story after wacky story. It'd have a little bit more depth, and I think could sustain longer than an hour or two conversation. I'll go with Phil.
I like it.
That's a good answer. I don't know. That's another tough one. I don't know. I mean, I listened to your podcast and I heard you ask that to somebody else. So of course I was like, oh my God. When he asked me that, what am I gonna? And I started, of course, my mind just goes into funny places. I'm like, well, could I spend 24 hours alone with Jim Morrison, even though it might be interesting? It could make me just want to reach over and kill the guy. But then I also was listening to another music podcast, and the guest was Susanna Hoffs. And I'm like, if I could spend 24 hours just listening to her talk, it would be very soothing and relaxing because her speaking voice is so on point. But wow, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd like to say it'd be fun to hang out with John Bonham, but he's been known to get kind of crazy too. It's one of those things where the idea of talking music or having an interesting conversation with somebody, but for 24 hours, it's got to be somebody that can maintain a certain amount of coolness about it, or it could get pretty hectic in that room. So, but I don't know. Oof. Right off the top of my head, uh, I don't know. I would like to spend time with John Bonham and just talk to him about drums and his life in general, and his knowing that he didn't love flying and I don't love flying, and knowing that worked with he had a farm and I kind of live on a farm, and it's somebody who has a similar interest. And maybe if we could be in the room and there was no alcohol in the room, me and John Bonham could have a good time just rapping like a couple of drummers. So
I like
Yeah.
it. I like it. Interesting what you said about Jim Morrison, though, because I feel like nobody ever thinks about that. Because, you know, it'd have to be someone that isn't going to get on your nerves. You know, like it's someone you look
I
up
know.
to, but on a personal level, they have to be somewhat normal. You know,
right. Well, I love the Doors, and he's an interesting, and he's smart, but he knows he's smart, so he can be intellectually abusive to people if he thinks he has the upper hand on them. So if he could just sit there and we could just, talk about music and life and stuff and pontificate, it might be kind of fun. But if he started getting obnoxious, and then I'd have to bounce him out the room.
Well, that's the tough thing, is because some of these people are your quote unquote heroes, and sometimes the best thing is not to actually meet them and to
Right.
keep that arm length distance from them. I had a chance to meet and talk at length with Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons at one point in time in '79 for about 20 minutes, just kind of hanging out in the same area. And I couldn't have been happier with the people that at least interacted with me and a couple other friends. So that can go two ways. It can be something that bolsters your opinion of these heroes, or can completely shatter what you think of them. So that's another reason it's a tough question.
Yeah, exactly. And the final one, what song would appear on the soundtrack to your life?
Oh, man.
Any song?
Yeah, any song at all. Can even be Beethoven or Mozart.
Oh, wow. Well, normally I would say Shakedown by the Hypnotics, which I still will.
I hate to be sounding self-aggrandizing, but I wrote a song called "What's Wrong with Wanting Everything." It appears on our first album. It's the cover title or cover. It's the title track off that album, and I like kind of the message of it. It talks about living life to the fullest and understanding that it's a finite thing, but trying to just trying to get the most out of it. And I like that concept.
Brilliant.
That's a good answer.
It is. And we're going to close out the show with Cut You Out of Me. Would you like to tell us a bit about it before it plays?
Yeah, it's one of those songs that it came from that time period when I was living on the island by myself. I was also recently out of a long-term relationship. And it was about the understanding that the relationship should have come to an end. But still, that's how somebody leaves an imprint on you. And maybe the logical choice of not being in the relationship is a good one. But the imprint and the trail of what somebody that was close to you for an extended period of time, that just doesn't evaporate. And it's trying to manage that situation and take the power back. It's definitely not a mean song as it could potentially sound from a breakup. It is more just about coming to terms with the fact that life has to move on, and how that impression that somebody leaves with you, how you deal with that.
Time to sleep it all. These dreams at night.
Hey guys, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. And if you're interested in signing up to Band Builder Academy, use the link in the show notes below and enter the code CONCERTS and you'll receive 10% off. So, until next time, keep rocking.
Hey, what are you guys still doing here? The show's over. It's over. You can go home. Go on. We'll see you next time. We'll be here.